Asking me why if the SEC down.
There has been a lot of conversation, especially during bowl season. It's amazing that the people that write at The Athletic crack me up. Because on one hand, they not only cheerlead when Cam Ward quits on his team at halftime, they encourage others to do so also. And those same people argue that bowl games are the end-all be-all for measuring conference strength. But the SEC did not have a dominant bowl season. There's only one team remaining in the playoff. Tennessee got beat up bad by Ohio State. Georgia got beat up by Notre Dame. Although the league did have the best record against Power 4 conferences by a rather significant margin, the talk has been the SEC no longer number one. They're not the dominant conference anymore. In your opinion, is that true? And then the follow-up would be, why do you think the way you think? And why is it happening?
So obviously the SEC isn't as elite at the top as it has been in years past, right? Georgia was just a good football team. Alabama, just good. Tennessee, just good. Texas, they're just a good football team, right? Now, Texas may win the national title, but you will not convince me that this Texas team is in the same pantheon as 2019 LSU, 2010 Auburn, 2012 Alabama. You're just not going to do it, right?
Right.
But we had this discussion, right? The SEC had 3 teams in the playoff, as many as anybody else. You had 3 more teams on the periphery there who, if they had gotten in, there would have been some controversy, but at the end of the day, you could have made a great case for all of them to be in, Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. And then you have Missouri, who they just won 10 games, and they weren't even in the playoff discussion, but they won 10 games this year. So Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Missouri. That's 5 teams in double-digit wins. Alabama's sitting there with 9. South Carolina's sitting there with 9. It's not that the conference is down. It's just there's not the super elite teams, and that's because of the portal. So a lot of kids have figured out, like, why am I sitting on the bench here at Alabama and Georgia when I can go somewhere else and play? And so Georgia and Alabama, those teams, they don't have the ridiculous depth they used to have. Their starting 22 is probably still as good as anybody in the country, but they don't have the 44. They don't have the 2 deep they used to have. So that's where the difference lies for me. They're still great football teams. I mean, on any given Saturday, all of those teams I just mentioned, maybe not Missouri. Missouri was not there wasn't a moment where I was like, that's an elite team. That's a really good team. But Ole Miss certainly had moments where I was like, they're playing as good as anybody in the country. Alabama had those moments. South Carolina, towards the end of the season, was having those moments where I was like, if South Carolina gets in, they're going to be a problem. So I think it's just the portal has made the SEC, there's more parity. I mean, we talked about it. Mississippi State was really the only team in the conference that obviously didn't win a game. But you had, Kentucky was the second worst team in the conference, but they beat Ole Miss. Vanderbilt beat Alabama. Arkansas beat Tennessee. So there's just parity now. And I think you have some of that in the Big Ten, too. I mean, the Big Ten this year, Indiana went 11-1. Why? New coach and the portal. New coach alone doesn't get it done. He had to be able to get players in there as well. Ohio State, I mean, what is Ohio State without the portal? They don't have Judkins. They don't have Caleb Downs. They don't have a couple of other key pieces. They don't have their
quarterback.
They don't have Will Howard. Oregon, without Dylan.
2 pieces, to both starting corners.
Yeah. What is Oregon without Dylan Gabriel? Or without Evan Stewart, who announced he was coming back today.
Did you see Oregon's, what would have been their starting quarterback if they depended on high school only? Didn't win the starting job at Boise State.
This is the new. I think this is the new normal in college football. You're still going to have great teams. Great team. Ohio State is a great team. And if they win the national title, they deserve it. Notre Dame is a really good team. I don't know if they're great. If they win the national title, I'll call them great. Penn State is a really good team. Texas is a really good team. I don't know that you're going to have these super teams anymore. Where what we saw in 2019 with LSU, that it's almost unfair that there's that much talent on one roster, and now the portal allowed. There are guys who would have transferred out of that team and may not have been there because they weren't getting their opportunity prior to 2019. So that's what I think is the situation for the SEC.
Yeah, like 4 through Now 16, I don't think is really unchanged. I'm with you. The era of stockpiling players on a handful of teams is over.
It's
and
over.
That's backed by data. That's not just a feeling, right? I try my best to have opinions that I can back with like an objective measure. And you can't always do that in sports. That's why it's, sports opinion and we debate over things or whatever. But in this case, it's undeniable that the talent is more evenly distributed across the sport than it was before this era came. It is absolutely undeniably true. And so that's contributing to some of it. Part of me wonders if the quarterback position's getting worse, whether it because of portal movement or the simplification of offenses at the high school. I don't know. I don't know why, but it does feel like quarterback play is getting worse. I mean, if you're the Titans picking at number 1, do you look at Cam Ward and think that guy's changing my franchise?
No, you can't.
No. And they're going to pick him anyway, or they're going to pick Shador anyway. One of the two is going to the Titans at number 1. With a new GM, by the way. They fired their GM today, so somebody else will be making that pick. But is defensive line play getting so good, or is offensive line play getting worse? I don't know, but it feels like there are so many great defensive linemen, and you don't have the inverse of that.
Yeah.
You don't have these great offensive line units that are just running over. I mean, look at the Final Four teams. Ohio State's had injuries, so that's been part of it, but
Texas
Ohio State struggles
good
to run the football. But Texas's offensive line, their pass protection numbers, not great.
Not great. It's not great, yeah. Again, pretty good.
Pretty good.
In some ways, great. I mean, Ohio State's skill position guys are elite. Absolutely elite. Smith, the running backs, elite players. But everybody's got holes now, and you can't just stockpile 5-star on top of 5-star because they're going to want to get out. They're going to want to find a place where they can play.
Yeah,
and that's kind of how it should be, right? It shouldn't be. Well, I signed here 3 years ago and I haven't played a lick, and I know I can play, but they just keep recruiting. It's not a player who's like a high 4-star's fault that 2 5-stars get recruited behind him, and they're just a little bit better. That 4-star kid can still play. He's still a good player. And so this is where you are.
Yeah, absolutely.